I'm Shannon.
And I'm Mark.
And this is Dirt Sailor the Podcast. On this episode of Dirt Sailor the Podcast, we will be talking about property tax cuts in Texas, what it means to have the IRS go after you, and who is outraising all of the other Democrats for Senate here in California. Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Well, happy Throat Punch Thursday.
How are you doing on this hot Thursday?
Melting but good.
Melting but good. Me too. Melting part.
I found out that when it's this hot, you can melt.
Yeah, I find that I don't want to do anything. I don't want to function. I don't want to go anywhere. I just want to do absolutely nothing.
Me either. I just want to sit here in front of this microphone and talk.
You want to talk?
I want to talk.
You want to talk? What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about Paul. I think his last name is Abate.
Who is?
Abbate.
I would say Abate.
Abate. That's what I thought.
Abate.
He's an American law enforcement officer who has served as a deputy director of the FBI since 2021.
Okay, so relatively new. He's under Biden. If it's 2021, unless he got into the position somewhere between January 1st and January 19th of 2021, it would have all been under Biden.
Well, he started out in the field office in New York City in 1996. He was in the criminal division and served as a member of the FBI SWAT team. And I have the utmost respect for law enforcement, but I strongly believe once these people get into positions of power,
they lose their ever-loving minds.
They lose their minds. They become disrespectful. I watched a subcommittee meeting the last couple of days with him trying to dodge questions about the weaponization of our Federal Bureau of Investigations. And he vehemently denied it when you can openly see it when FBI agents go after religious people for certain reasons, when they go after schools and parents.
Yes.
For wanting to protect their kids, and they feel that what they're paying for is an education. So wouldn't you think that they would have input in their kids' education?
I don't understand where we got this mindset that parents get no input into their child's education. If it wasn't for parents advocating for their children, the number of schools that would completely ignore a child's disability is sky high. I have watched parents advocate for their children and their children's needs, their children's learning styles, and even things that shouldn't be in the classroom. They've advocated that it be removed from the classroom. And yet they weaponize the FBI. And let me remind our listeners out there, in Virginia, when the superintendent of schools was saying that there was no harassment or assaults, I'll just leave it as assaults, happening on their campus due to any individual who identifies as the opposite sex to get into the bathroom, they said it after knowing that the assaults had already happened. And when a father stood up for his daughter who was assaulted, he was called a liar. They had him escorted out. He was arrested. They pressed charges against him. They used it as a case example for schools and the FBI that this threat needed to be monitored when it was a father advocating for his daughter who was assaulted and the school was covering it up.
Absolutely. In this particular committee meeting that I watched for a short time at lunch, because we only get a 30-minute meal, made me realize several things. First thing is that this FBI assistant director, even though it's a hard job, their minds probably reach critical mass at times, especially when they're FBI SWAT team members and they have to actually take somebody out. That always weighs on their mind. But one thing that I saw in him was an absolute narcissist.
And what led you to, not what led you to see it, obviously you're using your own eyes, but what was it?
His arrogant responses and his total disregard for elected officials, i.e. senators and congresspeople, that would ask him a simple yes or no question and a typical response like you get from all these people that testify, because either they can't remember what they say, they're coached by an attorney that tells them exactly what to say and how to answer, or they're just so arrogant or narcissistic, they don't care what we think. And that kind of chipped me off into another direction, which was them picking on parents for, like you just said a minute ago, which is a parent, a father trying to make sure that his kid's best interest is protected by him. And then you listen to President Joe Biden just a few days ago claim that our kids belong to the government, that it is the government's responsibility to educate and raise our children. Well, let's look at the school districts across the country. How well are they doing?
Not a very good job, not a very good job at all.
No.
And so if it's their responsibility, they're doing a very poor job, and they lack ownership in their poor job and poor responsibilities.
Are they? They have high school students, seniors, testing at 3rd and 4th grade level. Maybe they want to dumb down kids like this, so all they are is a voting block.
Yeah, if you're not smart enough to realize what they're doing, hey, they get to keep doing whatever it is that they're doing. And in fact, in New York City has just proposed to settle in a case where individuals couldn't pass the teacher test back from 93 to 95. There was a New York-based teacher test. Now they use a different model, which many other jurisdictions use, many other states use this teacher test. I believe it's called Praxis. But they use this teacher test, and people of African American descent and Hispanic descent were failing at higher rates than Caucasians. So again, this was from 93 to 95, then they changed their testing, and then there's been some off and on about whether or not they should lower the standards, change the standards. The whole idea behind the testing is that you could pass the test of the classroom that you want to teach in. So if you're talking elementary school, if you're talking specifically, say, high school level math, if you want to teach science, etc., you have to be able to pass your own test, so to speak, pass your own class.
Well, who are the testers that test the testers?
They're supposed to be learned individuals who make up the tests, who decide what it is that people need to know for these grade levels, even though, as you just talked about, the students aren't passing at the grade levels they need. And it turns out that they lower the standards, or wish to lower the standards for teachers getting into the classroom, and you end up with teachers who are illiterate, and then they're supposed to teach reading to their students.
So I would have to go back and look at the tests that they decided to downgrade and make them easier to pass. Is it that somebody legitimately sat there and looked at a program and a test and said, I'm going to make sure that every person of this ethnic background cannot pass a test?
I'm certain that they did not say that. And what's become of this out of New York is that it's a $1.8 billion settlement that they've proposed for the people who did not pass this test of a specific ethnicity from 93 to 95. And that proposal includes one individual who's now 60-something years old, apparently attempted the test multiple times, said it was racist, couldn't pass it. And I don't know where they went with their future, what they decided to do as a job, but it wasn't apparently teaching. They are going to get $2 million out of this settlement because of the racist test. Now, it turns out that Praxis, and then whatever they attempted to use in 2017, which was also an abysmal failure, had worse outcomes for African Americans than that racist test that they're about to pay $1.8 billion on.
So, question.
What's your question?
Did it have worst outcomes for African Americans because they just couldn't pass the test? Or did they have worse outcomes because people of all groups that are not qualified to do a job, just because in their heart they may think it's what they should do in life, They just simply can't pass the test. I wanted to be a doctor. Guess what? No such luck. You know why? Because I didn't like science.
Well, that's not going to help you.
100%.
So I am just going to take a wild guess. Just from some of the things that I know in background in history, having gone through, I actually have my master's degree in education, actually educating adults. I wanted to educate children. It turns out that I really love my children, and I love my close relatives' children, but I don't do so well with other people's children. I just don't have that calmness that I feel like teachers have when they're in the classroom, but I still love education. But where I'm going with this, everything that I've read about, all of the tests that I had to take to get to where I was, because I actually took the CBEST, I passed the CBEST, I took other tests, but then there was a point where I stopped, pivoted, and I ended up getting my master's degree for teaching adults. But what I realized in all of this, if we failed people at the elementary level, if we failed them at the junior high level, if we failed them at high school, I am not surprised, but we passed them, we kept passing them on to the next grade, that they believe that they should be able to do these things. And the majority of individuals of African American descent live in cities. Not as much in the suburbs, not as much in the country. They typically live in cities. That's not a knock at living in the city. But where have we failed in our educational system the most?
Mostly inner cities.
Yes. So we have failed these individuals. I don't think it's a racist test. We need to admit our failings in the school system, that what we've been doing, the billions we've been pumping into our schools year after year after year, we have failed because we put the teachers union ahead of anything the children need,
So you're thinking maybe we put their retirements, their pensions, and their tenure over educating children?
Yes, absolutely. And I do believe in a good pay for teachers. I do believe that they have a hard job, but if you looked at what happened over the course of COVID and how Miss Randy Weingarten pushed to keep kids out of the classroom while paying the teachers 100% of their salary. And we watched children get left behind. That is on adults. And then, just to kind of go back to what we were saying at the beginning, when parents stood up for their kids and what they wanted in the classroom, and sometimes that was just physically being in the classroom, sometimes that was, hey, social justice hour may be great after school or at lunch breaks. My kid wants to join and be a social justice warrior. That is amazing. Have a school club for that. The time is not in the classroom when the kids can't read, the kids can't do math, the kids can't write their own name. We don't even teach cursive because we can't take the time out of our day to teach kids cursive. So I think it goes back to our flawed educational system and not necessarily a flawed test.
So then it's our leaders. It's not the non-racial testing.
Correct.
Very good. Kind of like our homeless problem.
Oh, yes. Kind of like our homeless problem. The billions that we've spent on that. And I have a feeling you want to go somewhere, so I'm going to let you drive this boat first.
Well, I want to go to Southern California.
Okay. I am with you. I'm your co-captain going to Southern California.
As I understand that a person in the LA police union, placed very high in that structure, has told officers that they should consider moving on, going to other counties and communities, even states, and going where you're appreciated because of the absolute rise in crime, the rise in homelessness, which the two are pretty much tied together, and the fact that the officers cannot get a fair and equitable amount of pay for the risks they now incur in their jobs.
Okay. Gonna co-captain with you. not where I thought you were going, but still a very, very important piece that has been happening. Yes. Imagine you have given years because you truly believe in what you're doing. You truly believe in the community that you serve. And then your elected leaders have just destroyed everything that you hold dear. And then once it's destroyed, our homeless crisis has gone to extra crisis level. Theft is at an all-time high. We have a California legislature that believes that it shouldn't be a strike level offense if you have a child trafficking victim. Like the trafficker shouldn't get a strike on their record. But what we also have is a perpetual state of emergency. We saw this. We've seen it with Biden. We saw it with Newsom, and we've seen different elected leaders attempt to call everything an emergency so they can gather all their extra powers. So the LA homeless crisis has gotten worse, so much so that the mayor has empowered herself to declare a state of emergency or an emergency declaration, so that way she has more power to do whatever it is that she wants to do without having to worry about the authority to do so. So it's an executive authority. We see this all the time with Biden. We saw it with Trump. We saw it with Obama, all of the executive actions or executive authority. So now she's doing that, declaring homelessness a problem of their creation, a crisis, emergency level crisis, and now she has more power.
Yes, they create the problem, and then they say that they are
the solution.
And they are not.
And their solution usually involves more money their way.
And just in California, there are 171,000 homeless. It appears a bulk of them are from Southern California. And that was the other part of the article from the, I don't know if she's a vice president of the police union in LA. She said that the city fathers down there are treating them like absolute dirt, them being police officers.
Really?
Yes, and they're not deserving of that. There's some bad apples in every group, but when you think that you have the better widget and you've gone to college and you've done theory, but it's not in practical application, you can't rely on people that work for you to input or to put in place your theory, and then when it doesn't work, you have to take 100% control and blame it all on them. It's not their fault. It's yours. Just like I hope and I pray that the rest of this country understands what the state that we live in has gone through with the current governorship and the leadership. If 50% of the population in 2024 votes for Gavin Newsom, if he jumps into this race, y'all are very confused.
We are going to be in a world of hurt. He has shown that his belief system fails because we have been treating the homeless the way that he wants it treated. We've seen it in LA. We've seen it in San Francisco. He's the former mayor of San Francisco. He had this idyllic proposal that he was implementing back at the time when he was running for governor, and then he's implemented it. We have a legislature here in California that is 80% Democrat plus. It's 80% plus. They have a super majority. They can pass anything that they want to pass. They can do anything that they want to do. They have a governor who will 9 times out of 10 sign off on it. There's very rare circumstances that he vetoes it. And they've been doing everything they said they wanted to do, every social justice warrior program, everything, and we aren't getting better. If it were to be our way forward and a positive future, why are we seeing worse?
It's interesting when California tries to implement a policy that fails here. There are so many states that are quick to jump on the bandwagon and try the same thing, and they simply don't work. There's nothing wrong. Let me back up. There's something wrong when citizenry that are just common folks that can see common things realize there's failure. But these leaders cannot see, what's that saying, the forest through the trees, because the little narcissist in them thinks that they never do any wrong. They're always 100% correct when they're about 99% wrong.
And sometimes we do these things based on feeling. Oh, it's so sad. It would be better if, but our feelings are much like the little proposals in school where it sounds great on paper and they're getting their degree in it. It just sounds good. But when you, what is it called? You're feeding, not the narcissism, but you're like the cycle. The one person is a taker and the other person has a need to give and they think that they're going to fix it. It's called something. It's going to come to me like 10 minutes from now or later. But basically you're feeding into somebody else's addiction and you think that you're helping. So if they have an addiction and they're trying to get money for, say, drugs, and then you're like, oh, but they need to have a roof over their head, so I'm going to help give them money for rent. But then that money just goes for drugs. And then the cycle just continues, like where you have one person who's feeding and the other person who's just taking. Anyway, so it may sound good. It may give you feelings. It may think that you're doing something positive. But the reality is you're just hurting them and you're continuing to perpetuate the negative cycle. And so we have homeless who can do no wrong. If you're in San Francisco, in LA, openly doing drugs, no worries. On the sidewalk, encroaching upon, somebody else being able to safely get in and out of their apartment, no issues, no worries. Your tent blocks anything, doesn't matter. You steal to feed your habit, doesn't matter. We are now at the point where you cannot stop people from stealing. They even want to make it illegal in places to videotape people who are stealing. They don't want the cops to be able to arrest people who are stealing. And not all of the people who are stealing are feeding a drug habit. Some are just stealing to get money. And that's how they make their livelihood, so to speak. In Los Angeles, though, if you're on the right side of the law and you're trying to have a legit business and you're just trying to make money, feed your family, grow yourself, a Los Angeles business owner has said that city code enforcement officials have relentlessly targeted him for setting up a sidewalk sign too close to city property. It's right next to homeless encampments, and they don't deal anything with the homeless encampments. They're on city property, they're encroaching, doesn't matter. This guy has been hit over and over again with fines for having a sign on city property. When he went and had it checked out, he actually had them come to measure out and say where his business was, where city property begins and ends. It turns out the city was wrong, but they're still fining him, sometimes for the sandwich board being 1 inch, as they claim, 1 inch over and obstructing the sidewalk.
He should be able to sue them for harassment. That's pure harassment.
And at one point, he got a fine for having an unlawful banner displayed at his business. Do you know what that unlawful banner was?
What did it say?
Didn't say anything. It was the American flag. He got a fine for putting the American flag outside his door.
How dare him love America and put an American flag up.
The city has all the time in the world for code enforcement if you're a lawful business owner attempting to even give your tax dollars to the city, because he has to pay city taxes, state taxes, federal taxes, possibly employee taxes. I'm not sure if he employs anyone. And they'll go after that person.
Well, of course they go after law-abiding, tax-paying citizens because that's where they generate the revenue from to pay these homeless.
Right, because they're not getting it from the homeless.
Nope, they don't get a dime from the homeless.
No, sir.
What we get is potential destruction in neighborhoods, unfortunately, because just by the very nature of what and who they are and what happens to them mentally and emotionally, they're very filthy. Probably not by choice, some of them. But if you look at the sum total of the parts across the nation, the homeless problem is a mess. And unfortunately, they are a mess.
But do you know who's trying to give taxes back to their people? Who is trying to do well by their people?
No, who?
Texas.
What?
So apparently Texas has signed an $18 billion tax cut for property owners. And it for Greg Abbott to sign, and once he signs it, it sends it to the people. So it's not like instantaneous once he signs it. It goes to the people, and then the people have to vote in November to accept it. But it could mean up to $1,300 a year back in the pocket of a homeowner.
Nice. I moved to Texas real quick, get the money, and then move back.
Well, you got to pay property taxes in order to get it back. And Texas is known for their really high property taxes.
Well, see, I paid property taxes there back in 1898 through proxy, through family members.
Right, from our family members. So
Yes.
we're just going to go back and get it from them.
So then we're going to go to Alaska real quick, and we're going to get some money from them.
Yes,
you
for
get,
the oil.
Yeah, you get money there for living there. And it'll just be a temporary stay. Then we're going to run down to, it's either Oregon or Washington or Northern California, where they're giving away free $1,000 a month. We'll go stay there for a couple, 3 months. And we'll do all this while RVing and making YouTube videos on how to game the system.
Well, I mean, that's one way to do it. But I will say at least Texas is giving it back to the homeowners. Democrats in the state did try to put stuff in there for renters and put stuff in the bill for others, but it failed. The idea was to give it back directly to the people who were paying the taxes.
Oh, doesn't that kind of go back to original voting quite a few years ago, where
You had to be a landowner. Yes.
in order to vote because you had skin in the game?
That was the idea behind it.
Something like that. I'm sure it got twisted and turned and totally blown out of proportion, out of control, but that was the original intent.
That was. And while I do understand why we would want to extend voting beyond just landowners, I also believe that people who do not have skin in the game typically look at the other person, not everyone, but the other person, and say, you owe more, you're not doing enough, because that's how we're pitted against each other. By our representatives, they'll say, that person over there is an evil rich person. Now, if they are fudging their taxes, hiding money, putting it in offshore accounts, or abusing the system, if they're just doing exactly what our representatives have allowed them to do through the law, they're not doing anything wrong. It's our representatives who are at fault. But if they are actually lying, actually not paying their taxes, or they strong-arm people, stole property, stole land, etc., then yes, let's look at them and say you're an evil person.
Or threaten the prosecutor from Ukraine. Oh, you mean Hunter Biden and his ability since around 2010 or so to circumvent tax law?
Oh, absolutely. So we have it on video. Joe Biden retelling the story of how he stopped the investigation into Hunter Biden by withholding an aid package to Ukraine. They wanted the prosecutor fired, and guess what happened? Prosecutor got fired, and the aid package was given. There is ill in our government that needs to be stopped, and right now, that person is at the president level.
And that's a fact. And I know we've talked about it multiple times, because he was a senator for like 110 years, vice president for 8 years, and now president for 2.5. And I listened to a senator this morning who talked about the protection of the Bidens by Department of Justice, i.e. FBI and all of them. Well, if these guys have known, these guys being Lindsey Graham, has known for 25 years or however long, he's known the man that he's been corrupt, or there's been speculation that he's been corrupt. I have seen Lindsey Graham say on several occasions that him and Biden are friends.
He's a part of the corruption.
So what is it? Is he a friend? Is he an enemy? Is he crooked?
Maybe he's a frenemy. Friendly enemy. You have to be friends because you're both in the same place, or you both know about what each other's doing wrong.
So the enemy of my enemy
Is my friend.
Yes.
Yeah, so the Oversight Committee of the Democrats actually came out and posted a tweet about Gal Luft. He was indicted by the Biden DOJ. He is the whistleblower against Hunter Biden. And so when the Republicans said, we have a very credible whistleblower and he's in hiding, trying to get him here, et cetera, well, now that he's been indicted or the indictment has been unsealed, the House Committee of the Oversight Committee for Democrats made a tweet. When Chairman Comer said his very credible witness was missing, he meant he was a fugitive charged with secretly working as a foreign agent, conspiring to traffic Chinese weapons to 3 countries, smuggling Iranian oil, lying to the U.S. about it all.
So would that be Hunter Biden not registering as a foreign agent? So you can check one of those off because they had the exact same thing.
So the Oversight Committee actually did a responding tweet to that. Gal Luft was paid by the CEFC, the same CCP-linked company that paid the Bidens. In fact, Hunter claimed his father was in the room when he demanded payment from a CEFC associate. We didn't choose the Biden's associates. The Bidens did. This was Hunter Biden's associate. They worked together. They did the same things. Hunter Biden should be charged with all of this and more.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, it will probably never happen.
Who are you going to believe?
Well, we're going to be able to banter and talk about this for years to come because for whatever reason, these leaders seem to be insulated in D.C. from any prosecution or persecution.
Oh, absolutely. Because even when Hunter Biden's laptop is authenticated by the FBI in 2019, even when that information comes to light about what Hunter Biden was doing through emails that were sent and received with regard to what Hunter Biden was paid for, Hunter Biden was paid by Burisma in an attempt to get an individual entry or a visa into the United States. So that's what he was paid for. Hosting a party in which his name would be the person having the party and the invitation would be sent to this individual they were trying to get entry into the United States. So he was supposed to be the facilitator. They wanted to use this high-level official, which was Hunter Biden because of all of his connections, to get their person a visa because they had been previously denied and they were put on a watch list. So why is it he can act on behalf of a foreign company to facilitate getting a visa to this individual who had been denied a visa, yet they never say anything about the FARA Act, the Foreign Agent Registration Act? He was working on behalf of a foreign company to get a person a visa through this made-up facilitation of a party.
Yeah, some guy by the name of Paul Manafort comes to mind who was basically arrested. And they were going after him for stuff that happened previous to
Long time
Trump.
ago, yes.
But yes, that was one of the things they whacked him with was not registering as a foreign agent, as they did to General Flynn.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a who's who of who we're going to prosecute and who we're going to look the other way at. Just like listening to the interview with this assistant FBI director and these senators asking him about Hillary Clinton. Let's just go back. Let's go in the Wayback Machine.
A Wayback Machine. Okay, now we're talking about Hillary Clinton.
She's apparently she had information about her daughter's wedding, which that's why she said she had to get rid of the info because that was private. But she also had classified information up to and including top secret on that server. And no telling what was on the BlackBerries that, by the way, were government property.
Were they also wiped clean?
They were wiped clean, and then they were destroyed with hammers.
Why is that not shocking?
Okay, and what did they say about her? Nothing to see here. Oh, yes, she broke the law, but...
Then they gave a carve-out. They even changed the language from someone who should be prosecuted to a different verbiage, so it was non-prosecutable.
So there appears to be a group of family and friends in D.C. that get covered and protected, and nothing happens to them.
That would seem so.
So I am unsure if she's a congresswoman or a senator. Nancy Mace.
Nancy Mace, I believe she's a congresswoman.
Okay, I listened to her today and yesterday. She did a subcommittee meeting talking to one of the leaders of DOD.
Okay.
Need to watch it. It's very interesting because she's very powerful. She's very strong. She can articulate a position. I would not want to tangle with her because she would make me look like the mere simpleton that I am. And the leadership within the DOD, they have never, ever had a clean audit. They have failed every single audit since their existence.
So that just shows that it doesn't matter what their audit is because they'll just be allowed to keep doing whatever it is that they're doing.
And that's basically the point she was making, that every time one of them comes up before one of these committees, they hem, they haw, they don't have the answers. They deny, deny, deny. And she's talking about how American people, if they really knew the magnitude of the billions of dollars that we throw away, we wouldn't have to pay this much in taxes and fines and penalties and fees to get into national parks and donating money to lost causes and giving money around the world. It was a great 5 minutes because that's what she had. She told me more in 5 minutes than I've known the last 5 years. I had no clue they have failed 100% of their audits.
So I had heard that they did fail audits. I did not realize it was 100%.
They have never passed an audit, not once.
And there's no consequence.
Well,
and you know what they want? They want more of your money. It's never enough, even though they can't spend your money well and treat it well. It's never enough.
Well, I'm going to give you a little conspiracy theory here.
What's your conspiracy theory?
Here's why they fail audits 100%. Because we're working on black ops projects that no one needs to know about.
Isn't that why a toilet seat costs $45,000?
Absolutely. And this is probably, and that's what came to mind with me was, okay, these guys are failing these audits because they're moving money around. They're working on skunk work type projects. We've got secret planes. We've got secret carriers and, trucks and buses and drones, and they're never going to come clean with how much and where the money goes.
While that may be true, there are also government entities that reallocate funds based on whatever thing they wish to do, which they may not have gotten funds appropriated for in the first place. So, for instance, I used to work for USCIS, which is under the Department of Homeland Security, United States Citizenship and Immigration Service. So they get their annual budget. They are working mostly off of fees. They are a fee-based agency, but there are certain things that the government requires them to do that they actually get some money for through appropriations, but the vast majority of it is fee-based. So they'll also say our budget is settled for, and then they'll say how much each organization within USCIS is getting. So there's different districts, field offices, programs, etc. Well, one of the years that I was working for them, they decided to reallocate funds to open up a new service center after not being able to get the service center approved. So they just swooped out, all of the funds that were already allocated for certain things and just took it all and decided to open up a new service center. And that's how they were going to strong arm their way into getting a new service center open. Then they had to get building space, hire all the people, etc. So even though they had their allocations, they still went and decided to do something different with it. And then you just ask for forgiveness instead of permission.
Absolutely. It's easier to ask for forgiveness.
Yes, but the IRS, though, I don't know if you heard about this. The IRS is proposing another way to take more money out of Americans' pockets, which is instead of having to get fines and penalties approved by a supervisor or above, they're going to let IRS agents say they act as a supervisor and then approve penalties for taxpayers. So it's going to be more of an imbalance in who can ask for these fines, when they can ask for these fines, and how much the fines can go for. So your typical definition of what an immediate supervisor is gets changed by the IRS, and then you just have individuals who can run away with extra fines.
How corrupt we've either become or we've always been.
And to go along with that, apparently Facebook and Google have gotten your tax info, and they're very excited for it. They're not sorry for it. So this was a story that was talked about by Matt Taibbi and Walter Kern on an episode of America This Week. They have a podcast. And while talking about it, it turns out that H&R Block and other tax prep companies shared sensitive personal and financial data from tens of millions of customers with Meta and Google. And we have, I will say, I agree with them looking into it, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, etc. They are investigating H&R Block Tax Act and Tax Slayer after the report in The Verge from last year said that these companies were using code that was funneled data, including users' income, tax refund amounts, who your dependents are, what your adjusted gross income is, even the names of your dependents. So I understand that we might put that stuff out, but on Google or on Facebook or maybe in Instagram, but they are being fed this information. And so now minors are tagged to federal tax owed, etc. by the parents. They are getting all of this data through Tax Slayer, H&R Block, Tax Act, etc. And I find that to be very disturbing.
Yes, and I believe that Congress is about to hold the owner of Meta there in contempt of Congress.
But what good does it do?
It does nothing, because if you look into it, they always threaten to hold people in contempt, and they do nothing. And they really wield no power, because you have to refer it to DOJ to prosecute. And if DOJ is not an elected position, but an appointed position, they're going to do what the person that hired them asked them to do. And with releasing people's information, I believe that just happened with the U.S. Navy. I think it was the Navy, because of an incorrect keystroke.
Instead of .mil.ml?
Yes, it was sent to countries that are not kind to us.
And support Russia.
Yes, there was all kinds of personal information and they said no classified, but I guarantee you mixed up in all that was probably some classified stuff.
Well, even keep this information out of public eye is still may not be truly classified in the sense that it has a classification marking, but sensitive data is still not supposed to be released.
Right, and that's a relative term, because as we've seen and heard from leaders that handle this sort of thing, that we overclassify anyway to the tune of millions of documents every year, so you'll never be able to look at it all. That's why I've always said to you and others that these VPNs and all this stuff, don't believe the ads. Don't think that your information is secret, because I guarantee you that there is a government outside of the U.S. or the U.S. owns those VPNs.
And it's taking your data.
Yes, you're funneling all that data right to them.
100%. Do you know what we can't do, though? So speaking of a government agency, I didn't realize just how little the Secret Service could protect the White House grounds.
I know. They even utilized the FBI to do fingerprint analysis And on a bag that was carried into the White House and hidden somewhere, there was 0 fingerprints, no traceability of the cocaine. That's one thing I haven't heard people talk about. Cocaine has markers in it too. People use certain things to cut it with. They know the region and the origin of the coke. So they could actually go backwards and figure out actually who it belongs to.
And didn't someone's grandson unfortunately just pass away from a drug overdose, and then they were able to go back and figure out who sold the drugs based on what it was and make an arrest? So you're telling me that a baggie of drugs is dropped in the White House, which is under monitor 24/7, which is under cameras 24/7. You have to sign in and out 24/7, and nothing.
Well, I did not.
Along with the actually knowing the origin of the particular cocaine.
I did not realize that this is the 3rd time in a year.
But the other 2 were only marijuana. But I did not realize that either until the report came out that they were closing the case. And then they not silently, then they slipped in. And by the way, there were 2
Do you know how many people they interviewed?
0.
0.
They said it wasn't worth their time. They weren't going to waste taxpayer money to interview. They claimed it would be 500. Others said there was no more than 200 max. 3 times they changed the location of where the drugs were found. First, it was outside the ground. Then it was in a highly trafficked area by tourists. Then it was in a less trafficked area, but there were construction workers. You're telling me you want coked up construction workers working on the job at the White House?
So you're just letting people freelance and run all over the White House now. They can just go wherever they want. So they must have had Jeffrey Epstein cameras in there because they just quit working mysteriously.
Right. They can't say anything because the cameras quit working over a baggie of coke.
And a former Secret Service agent who protected, I believe, 2 or 3 presidents, had a podcast, was on Fox News, pretty popular guy. His name's Dan Bongino. He said this is BS. They absolutely know who that belonged to. There is no way that whoever the person or persons were went in there, placed that coke there, and didn't get seen on camera.
But we're being led to believe that they can't possibly run it down. And it's not just about the baggie of coke, because it is a misdemeanor. That's one thing that's been pointed out. The amount that was in the baggie is misdemeanor level. Okay. But you have a person who has access to the White House with drugs. If they're willing to bring in a baggie of drugs into the White House, chances are they're a habitual user. That also means, in all likelihood, that they can be turned, corrupted, bought off. Well, they don't have to be bought off. You can strong arm them. I'll tell everybody about your drug problem if you don't do X, Y, Z for me.
Yes, and even if you join the military and you try to be a top secret crypto, and then later on down the line it's found you have a bankruptcy, guess what? You can't get a clearance.
You can't get a clearance. Oh, Hunter Biden, do a little coke, guess what? Can't be a Navy officer anymore. I believe he was going into the reserves. And he got kicked out because he had a drug problem. You have braces. You can't be in the Navy, but that's a side story.
He was at his command for 1 month.
Before he tested positive.
Failed a drug test. Yes.
And so I don't know if they treat officers differently or if he was intentionally trying to get out of it. But when I was stationed in Pensacola, Florida, after my unfortunate hearing loss, my bad surgical outcome, I ended up working with the restricted master at arms on base. And one of the things that would happen is if they did a random drug test and someone popped positive, they would get restricted to base. They would get typically 45 days restriction, 45 days extra duty, doc, half a month's pay for 2 months, something like that. And then they would be given a second chance. They would be given a second chance to prove that they are a changed person, that this was a one bad thing. At least there in Pensacola. Maybe other commands did it differently. But the CO of the base that I was at, I think did the right thing, which was punishment, but opportunity. Opportunity to turn yourself around. Because now you're presumably 45 days sober. You can also get help. You can reach out. There are opportunities to go to AA, go to NA, Narcotics Anonymous, if that was your problem, and get help. So he's in there a month. Maybe they just saw nothing in him that was worth redeeming. But even in Pensacola, there was opportunity to be redeemed. That's all I'm saying.
It's very well put together.
Okay, so something that we've talked about previously on this podcast was the individual, Sam Bankman-Fried, who was able to spirit away from the billions of investments as a crypto guy. And because he was a big-time mega donor to all of these Democrats, he seemed to float under the radar until he finally didn't, basically. And then people made a run on his bank, they made a run on another bank, and there was a bunch of collapses that we had to prop up. But what happens when it turns out your government can destroy anyone? An IRS-led global alliance ruined an innocent American banker. So in the Bahamas in 2021, Sam Bankman-Fried was allegedly conducting his multi-billion-dollar scheme. He was a virtue signaler, all of that. Really bad actor, and he seemed to fly under the radar. But 800 miles east, there was a conservative activist named Peter Schiff who was running his own bank in Puerto Rico. He was a financier, prominent economist, and he regularly spoke publicly about how he thinks the government should run. Fewer taxes, less regulation. The U.S. government teamed up with 4 other countries to undertake the world's largest tax evasion probe against Schiff. Despite a very significant investment by all of the countries involved, they found nothing. So what did they do? They destroyed him anyway. So authorities leaked the existence of the investigation to media and then cited the resulting negative publicity to take the bank from him, which cost more than $10 million. And I don't know if our listeners remember Nancy Pelosi explaining how they do it in the government, which is to feed the story to the media, have the media publish it, and then turn back and cite the media on the publication. And if the media ever turns around and asks them where they got their info, they'll just say they got it from the media. So they plant the story. And that is what happened here. So he lost everything. The IRS's top criminal enforcement official flew to Puerto Rico, held a press conference, gave the impression that the IRS was shutting down the bank for facilitating tax evasion and money laundering, even though never happened. Schiff's Euro-Pacific Bank was actually being closed by a Puerto Rican oversight board that claimed it was critically insolvent. So on one hand, you said they're facilitating all of these tax evasion schemes. So in other words, the board claimed that the bank might not be able to return the customers' money, and that if there was a run on the accounts, which is what happened in the case of Bankman-Fried, they would basically, if there was a run, they couldn't pay all of the deposits, therefore they needed to take over the bank. But Schiff's bank catered to ultra-conservative clients who prioritized keeping their money over earning interest. The bank didn't lend out its deposits. The profits came mostly from charging fees for transactions. So they weren't poorly invested. They weren't at risk of doling out too much money and then not being able to pay deposits. And it made it perhaps what they considered the most run-proof bank in the world because they weren't making potentially bad investments.
They were prudent investors?
Prudent in holding the money and charging fees for certain transactions just to keep it safe. It was supposed to be a safe location to keep your money, almost like a safety deposit box.
So that lends credence to the fact that when Mr. Obama was president and the Tea Party arose, that mysteriously and miraculously all these people started getting audits from where?
Audits from our IRS and the inability to even have a nonprofit.
Code
They wouldn't
enforcement.
yes, would come out if you had different businesses and you linked other people to the Tea Party, then they could be looked at.
Yes, and I don't remember the business owner's name, but she had never had one violation in her 20-some years of owning this company. And then miraculously, when she joined the Tea Party, the FBI shows up, code enforcement shows up, IRS starts auditing her. I think there was 14 entities in total that
were going after her.
So yeah, it's very scary when you're a single person or a sole little proprietor, and then all of a sudden the full force of somebody that has an unlimited supply of money and arms and backing can literally wipe the floor with you in mere days or minutes.
And in fact, here with the Puerto Rican regulator later acknowledged that they had enough cash deposits to cover they had enough cash to cover all of its deposits.
Of course they did, but the damage is done.
It's already done. So Puerto Rico put it into receivership so they could liquidate it. And what has happened since? It said that Schiff couldn't be permitted to own it because of negative press, the articles that were based on the IRS and law enforcement leaking all of this information that was not truthful, or, they were looking into him, but they found nothing. So it's been a year, and the receiver has not returned any of the deposits. It totals $65 million to the bank's thousands of customers. So you said that you were taking this money because if there was a run, you couldn't return it. But now that you've taken it over, you're not liquidating it. You're holding the deposit of conservatives. It was a conservative bank. So not only do you have a businessman who lost his bank, you have people who deposited money up to $65 million with thousands of customers that can also no longer access their money for over a year now. Over a year. So if you think your government can do anything, this is one example of how they can.
Yet, if you're one of the biggest liars to ever work in the medical industry in America and not be terminated for your actions, and I'll say the name even though I thought we were so done talking about
talking about him.
Dr. F.
Newly unredacted communication showed he is a liar.
And he is still getting U.S. Marshal security detail on taxpayer money, despite his retirement.
Oh, well, that's because we have to make sure that he's ultra secure because people might find out he's actually a liar.
Well, do congressmen get security after they leave office?
No. I don't believe so.
No. Senators?
Oh, what about Joe Biden when he was a retired VP? Did he get Secret Service or other marshal protection?
I believe he did.
He got it for 6 months lawfully, and the rest of that was somehow given to him unlawfully. He wasn't supposed to get it. Even Hunter Biden had the Secret Service coming in and cleaning up all of his dirty deeds. So I guess if you're the right person... So who is Fauci? Because he seems to be the right person. If people who aren't supposed to get security details and extra money and extra thing, if he's now a multimillionaire, who is Fauci? What dirt does he have?
What dirt does he have on something? No, they know that he is actually a brainiac when it comes to infectious diseases. And if they were willing to do gain of function against government policy, then he would be willing to get a hold of one of his contacts, I'm sure. Just conspiracy. Because they're already talking about
conjecture.
Yes, they're already talking about another pandemic right before the 2024. I hope it's just fodder and it's really not true, because it's the young kids and the young families that can't endure another one of these this close together.
No, but it would be a good way for them to shut down the United States once again, even though it was proven it didn't work the first go around. Guarantee they would implement those same policies that didn't work.
Yes, and according to a couple of podcasters, they're making a prediction that Trump will not run. He will take a plea deal, which will disallow him from running in 2024. I don't believe that. See, that's where I do believe there's two tiers of justice, because we had a vice president that had
Selling secrets across the United States, selling secrets across the world, a son who was allowed to do business dealings. He could publicly say that he was going to withhold money from a country in order to get a prosecutor to stop investigating his son. You can do anything.
And there's no prosecution, no ramification for him. And I keep listening to these senators and congresspeople say that there is a law that's part of the Documents Act that a former president has 5 years to review his or her paperwork, all their documents, pull out the classified, pull it with somebody from the National Archives, start pulling out the classified, secret, top secret, send it back to the National Archives, and then they go on their merry way. This is strictly a hit piece on him. They're trying to blow him at the kneecaps.
Right. They can't stop him any other way, so they figure the way to do it is to make him a criminal so he can't run. And that is how the only way that they have figured out he can't do what they can do because only they can do what they can do. He can't be a criminal too. Let's presume the charge is correct. Let's presume that everything he's charged with is correct. Let's also presume that everything they're not going after Biden for, which is the same thing, he had classified documents too, the difference being he was a VP, he was a senator, he wasn't a president. If it is correct to go after him for having classified documents in his home, then charges need to be levied against Biden.
Right. If they prosecute and find Trump guilty, then they have set precedents to go after a former vice president who was not allowed to declassify documents.
So unless and until you go after both sides equally, I'm not saying that I agree with committing the crime. I'm saying that if you're going to have lopsided prosecutions, we have a problem. Another thing, we have a Boston mayor, Michelle Wu, who sent a list of critics and protesters to the police. So you have a Democrat who is admitting to creating a list of her most vocal critics and providing that to local law enforcement. And then the Boston PD now has that list of people that she's claimed either harassed her or physically intimidated her, either outside her home, at city functions, at an annual neighborhood park coffee hours. So you're saying that you need to be secure in your place at all times. Nobody can talk out against you. Nobody can speak out against you. Nobody can make you feel uncomfortable. I thought it was the left that told us to make people uncomfortable, yell in their faces, get in their faces, make sure that you can't have coffee, you can't have a dinner date, you can't have fun if we disagree with each other. And now we're sending a list of people who make us feel uncomfortable for doing those things to the police to go after them. Weird.
Very weird. So a little Navy news.
Navy news we could use.
So we have a Navy captain who has become the first woman to run a naval construction group.
CBs.
Yes, so she will be in charge of the Atlantic Coast CB battalions. All of them.
Wonderful.
Which is pretty cool.
That is amazing.
And concurrently, or at the same time, there's a Navy captain that is retiring. He is one of the last officer to serve on a diesel sub.
Wow.
Diesel electric. So he was in the Navy for 40 years. You'd think he would be like 110 years old. Oh my God, diesel sub. He just turned
58.
Yep.
I was going to say, did he join right when he was 18? Could have been younger if he got parental permission, but I was assuming.
58, and he had no intention on staying in the Navy that long. But he loved his career, so he actually retired on the battleship in Hawaii.
No way.
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. The USS Midway?
Yes.
Side story, I got to do a naturalization ceremony with our military members and other locals on the USS Midway.
That is so cool.
Amazing. It was an amazing opportunity, and to watch so many wonderful individuals get naturalized. But that is
It's incredible.
Great piece of military history, Navy making history for the captain, and then retiring history. Oh, that's just absolutely amazing.
It is. You know who else made history too is
Who's that?
Zelensky, the current president of the Ukraine. I don't know why we call it the Ukraine. The current
Because
president,
we're from California and we put the.
The is in front of everything. The 5, the 10 freeway.
And that's how you know a person is from California, is if they put the. So for all of our listeners out there, maybe you already know this, but we put the in front of things.
Well, you know, he has led me to believe now that he's an ungrateful dude.
Why?
Us and other countries are sending literally billions of dollars.
Well, our cluster bombs are now over there.
And in weapons and ammunition and technology and assistance. And the big push for him is to have NATO make a decision immediately. And he thinks that NATO's buffoons because they're not fast-tracking him and just making him a member of NATO now. Well, what the NATO leaders have decided to do is there's normally 2 steps or 2 processes. They've knocked it down to 1, and they're saying to him, once the war is over,
if your country still survives, we might consider.
We will consider, or we will bring you into NATO. Because I believe they know that if they put him in NATO now,
World War III,
Putin's going to start popping off nukes. And I'm not a nuclear expert. I'm not a war college expert. But I do believe that when a man says adamantly that runs a communist country that owns more nukes than anybody else in the world, if you let this little country into NATO, I'm going to start bombing you. Because that's what popped this whole thing off in the first place, is I believe our vice president making a statement on foreign soil that absolutely Ukraine was going to join NATO. Well, plus I believe there was a building over in Ukraine that might have been housing, just conspiracy, a lot of documentation. Maybe those 16 to 20 videos that supposedly this oligarch had on Biden and his family. Maybe they had
warehouse.
Yeah, or warehouse. Maybe they had to knock those out first. And it's just
people.
A conspiracy. I'm just kidding, so don't take me seriously. I have no idea what happened in this geopolitical realm here.
So we go and we support Ukraine. We end up having individuals, we being the United States at present moment, is supporting Ukraine. And we have individuals who basically say there's not enough ways that we can support Ukraine. And we're trying to give more money, more ammo. And then we have Biden who comes out and says that because of Trump, we don't have enough ammo. And we can't make enough ammo. And it takes too long to make certain pieces of ammo. And this is Trump's fault. You just gave away that our stockpiles are low. You're giving more to Ukraine than we can possibly make, according to him, in a certain period of time, yet we're continuing to give our resources, our military weapons, including cluster bombs, to Ukraine, and we cannot, according to Biden, take care of ourselves because of, again, according to Biden, Trump made it more difficult to make ammo at the rate we need to make ammo.
Well, and I believe that's bogus, and I also believe that the military-industrial complex will not allow that. They will make sure there's plenty of ammo and plenty of weapons to send. Why? Because they're making lots of money right now.
So they got to have it in order to make the money?
Yeah, and that's where I blew it in my retirement plan, is not having stock in Raytheon or
all of them, yeah.
All of them that are making weapon system, and their stock's probably as high as Microsoft and Google and them right now, through the roof.
Oh, I'm sure it is. And you know who else is making money? Adam Schiff. He is outraising all of the other Democrats who are running for Senate. Now, for those of you who may not be following, Senator Dianne Feinstein, who is just like Joe Biden and barely there, announced her retirement. So now you have Adam Schiff, you have Katie Porter, Barbara Lee, all running for that seat that is going to open. Schiff has collected nearly double the combined total raised by Katie Porter and Barbara Lee in the same period because they have to do filings every quarter. He is making bank. That is a person who lied over and over and over again about many different
That's
things.
what I was just thinking.
And yet the liars raise the money is where we're at because Adam Schiff is making bank.
That's because they were just happy that he was trying to slap Trump around, even though he was telling mistruths. They don't care about the truth.
No, they don't. And so speaking of Democrats and what one person's truth is not somebody else's truth. But in Georgia, there was an individual that for her hill was education. She really believed in allowing student choice, school choice. So your money follows your choice of school. It was considered slightly anti-Democrat party. She swayed to what is a Republican side because she believes the school system is failing the children, and she pushed to recognize school choice and taking your money for the schools or to the school that you believe will do better for your child. So after she went public with this, members of the Democrat Party just assailed her. They tore her down. They said she was a terrible person for believing in school choice because that was anti-Democrat Party.
Anti-socialism.
And so she decided to leave the Democrat Party because she really felt hurt by her party choice, like her party. And so she announces that she's leaving the Democrat Party. And in the days since she's an African-American individual, she has been sent nasty and racist messages because of her choice to leave the Democrat Party after they failed to support that she was doing what her people, the people who elected her, wanted. She is receiving message after message after message, tearing her down because of her race. And I just find it really interesting that Republicans are often seen as the racist or called the racist. Right. But if you don't toe the Democrat line, you're now an Uncle Tom. You are insert racist language, epithet, etc. And that is what's now happening to...
Of course, because they're really not the party of inclusion.
Exclusion and racism.
Yeah, they're liars. They don't tell the truth. You know who tells the truth, though, is this Robert Kennedy.
Robert Kennedy tells the truth, tells it like it is. He's running on the Democrat ticket, right?
Yes. And he basically made a statement this week that if he's elected president, if there's crimes, he will prosecute Dr. F.
Well, we'll see if it happens. It's not really his choice to prosecute if he's elected president. No, now he can assign it to the DOJ or ask the DOJ to investigate.
Behind closed doors that they go after him with the full force of the government. Yeah, you know who John Kerry is?
I do know climate czar John Kerry.
Do you believe he tells the truth?
No.
Do you believe he actually loves and believes in the climate?
No, I think he sees dollar signs.
Do you know who he's married to?
Heinz Ketchup.
Yes.
Heir and heiress. And the only reason why I know that is you said it on a prior podcast as far as who he was married to. I did not realize it until you said that.
Yes, and I believe that they were bought out recently by Berkshire Hathaway and another conglomerate.
Would not be surprised.
Well, prior to that, they used to own an airplane. It was a Gulfstream, I believe it was a G9. Had an interesting tail number. It was N57HJ.
Really? 57?
Yes.
Like in Heinz Ketchup?
Yes, like in 57 varieties. Well, they sold that bird recently because of all the grief he was catching about flying around the world.
Even though he said to Congress, I do not own a jet.
Right. His wife owned the jet. Their corporation owned the jet.
Tomato, tomato. Heinz, yes. Heinz.
Well, it's interesting. I kind of dove into it a little bit today, and the original holding company that owned the airplane was Flying Squirrel, LLC.
Flying Squirrel, really? That's an interesting name.
Yes.
Seems, I don't know how unique it would be. How unique is it? Enough that it's known who
owned the
who
airplane.
owned the airplane?
Well, when it was Flying Squirrel LLC, you could actually track the airplane the way I follow you guys around when you fly. That's with Flight Aware.
Okay.
So the airplane was sold to AC Aviation LLC.
Okay. So we have a sale.
Which is a holding company of, I believe it's AD Aviation LLC, which is actually owned by Business Filings Incorporated, which is owned by AC Investment Management, which sells hedge funds, commodity trading, and power trading.
I don't know. That kind of sounds like Shell.
Well, I was trying to figure
Shell.
that out because when you look up the address online, it gives you an address of 1350 Avenue of the Americas, Suite 2300, New York, 10019. Well, when you pull that up, which I screenshotted a picture of it, most of that floor is up for rent.
Okay.
When you look at the directory of businesses within there, I did not see that particular company. Doesn't mean they didn't move. Doesn't mean they didn't make changes.
Okay.
But they also have an address in Oxford, Connecticut, which is their mailing address. And they also have a business filing agent, which has a business address in East Hartford, Connecticut. So yes, it is almost like the Bidens and the 20 shell companies to move money here to here to here to here. And the interesting thing about this whole thing is 4 days after the airplane was sold, what did they do? Well, it's registered now to AV Aviation LLC. And per the FAA, it went to them on August 22nd. 4 days later, a person by the name of Yvonne Rivera requested the FAA place on industrial level limited aircraft data display to block anybody in the public purview from flight following the airplane.
Why would they do that?
Absolutely. So Kerry has insisted multiple times that he didn't own an airplane. He doesn't fly private. He flies commercial. And when you ask if he owns this shell company or, what's going on here, he just flat denies it.
Right.
So he's another one who's either a narcissist, a sociopath, a habitual liar. He really does agree with people and the environment, yet what can you do? I'm sitting in front of a 20-some inch screen TV or computer monitor here, and you can do what? Zoom calls. Where's he at right now as we're speaking? He's in China at an environmental meeting. Okay. I think he could do that by Zoom call.
And I think that we should be doing that. People who profess to want to take care of the environment, but then turn around and do the exact same things that they're requesting people, the common folk, not do. I'm sorry, that's extraordinarily problematic, and it doesn't support that you believe in what you're saying.
Right, and it's fake news, and they're asking you to do something that they're not willing to do.
Just like Bill Gates, when he just flat out says, not verbatim, but I'm paraphrasing here, he doesn't have to stop buying the yachts and the planes and going around the world because he invests money into the environment. Therefore, he's allowed to do whatever it is that he wants to do.
Speaking of that dude and John Kerry and buying yachts and planes and stuff, I do believe that John Kerry purchased a big yacht and kept it at a certain location to circumvent what? Sales tax.
Oh,
So
you don't say.
These guys are very, very corrupt.
So I would like to touch base on a particular topic, a particular person that we've talked about before, and that is Ray Epps. So it has come out that Ray Epps is suing Tucker Carlson and Fox News because of what he has claimed as lies surrounding his involvement in January 6th. So he's saying that Tucker Carlson is at fault for putting him out there and speaking to conspiracy theories about him that are untruthful. So what we did see, what is on video, is that Ray Epps was in Washington, D.C. Ray Epps was seen the day before, January 5th, 2021, saying we need to go into the Capitol and take back what is ours and other verbiage that he used. And then on January 6th, he is seen on video encouraging people to go forth. It appears that he's encouraging people to take down barriers and go to the Capitol. So he has filed a lawsuit against Tucker Carlson and Fox News, saying that because Carlson said he must have been a government informant or a government plant or something in order for him not to get prosecuted for several years when he's seen on video, when he is identified, whereas other people who were merely present somewhere around the Capitol grounds didn't even have to go to the actual Capitol, but were present. They got caught up in the geofencing.
Through facial recognition, yes.
Yes, so geofencing, facial recognition. There was even a couple in, I believe it was Alaska, who wasn't even present, but someone said that that person looks like my neighbor or that person looks like this person. They went to their homes to serve a search warrant to look for more evidence, even though they weren't even in D.C.
Oh, is that the FBI that claims they don't do things like that?
Yes.
Okay.
So Ray Epps, not only is he suing, he is for defamation. So he claims that he tried to diffuse tension between Trump supporters and the police, and he confronted agitators. He didn't participate. But I guess now Ray Epps, through his attorney, is claiming it is also Tucker Carlson's fault that the government is going to prosecute him. That if Tucker Carlson wouldn't have brought up his name over and over again, that the government would have just let him go because he really didn't do anything.
Oh, you mean videos don't tell the truth?
No.
Oh, my goodness. Well, also with Tucker Carlson, prior to him being terminated, he was going to show a video of an interview he did with the Capitol Police Chief,
who in fact said that there were feds on the ground.
100%. So he's going to re-interview and re-air under his new platform.
Oh, I do want to be clear, though. Tucker Carlson may not be individually named in the lawsuit, but they're going after what he said while he was an employee of Fox News.
Right, going after what they feel is the big money.
Yes, definitely going to go after the big money.
See, after Dominion was able to get Fox News to settle out of court and pay hundreds of millions, even though you still have people saying that the machines were broken, you have Democrats that are on video as far back as 10 years ago during elections saying that the voting machines were very easily manipulated. So which is it? They're manipulatable. They're not. You're a liar. You're not.
Most secure election ever. It's not.
More people voted for a 77 or 78-year-old white man than voted for the historically first black president. Baloney.
Even though he had so many people to rally for him and support him and cross the aisle for him.
I don't buy any of it. What happened was the Democratic Party threw up a ruse. They took the cheapest thing they could to get over the finish line, and I think now they're going to regret it because one of two things. Either they're going to ask him to not run in 2024. They definitely do not want Kamala Harris running for president because she has proven that somebody as sophisticated as Tulsi Gabbard can wipe the floor with her.
Yes. Every time I hear her speak, she sounds like she's talking to preschoolers, even when she's talking to a room full of learned individuals.
Yes. Don't care about her at all.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor Duo. Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.